We just had the largest drug bust in the history of drug busts in Phoenix, Arizona this week, 1 million fentanyl pills. This is a poisoning of America. I don't even call them drug overdoses because one pill, one half a pill can kill you. They are trying to take down this country.
Well, that was Arizona gubernatorial candidate Kari Lake with me yesterday on Sunday Morning Futures, sounding the alarm about the record amount of fentanyl discovered in Arizona. Similar story in Texas. The crisis is being felt all across the country, in fact. In Sedgwick County, Kansas, the total number of fentanyl overdose deaths or poisonings expected to exceed 300 deaths in 2022. Joining me right now is Senator from Kansas. He is a medical doctor, Roger Marshall. Senator, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks very much for being here. You recently introduced the Drug Cartel Terrorist Designation Act. This formally designates drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. Tell me about determining that determination and what difference we see when you actually name this group a terrorist group.
Yeah, well, Maria, certainly the governor candidate is correct. One pill can kill every day millions of pills coming across our border, killing maybe 200 or 300 people every day. But, you know, I know you're familiar with 911. It was in your backyard, but on 911, we lost 3,000 Americans. And certainly we hold that day in reverence. But now in America, we're losing 3,000 Americans about every 2 or 3 weeks. And what we did in response to 911 is declare war on terrorism, and that's what we want to do with the cartel. The cartels and Joe Biden are largely responsible for the poisoning of our young adults. So by making them terrorists, it'll give our law enforcement officers and our prosecutors more teeth. It'll have an all-government approach. So, for instance, the Treasury Department could freeze the assets of the cartel. But look, we're just putting our fingers in the dike here. The real problem is Joe Biden. I don't know why he's turning his back on America's youth, why he's allowing 200 or 300 Americans to die every day from fentanyl poisoning.
Yeah, and Todd Pyro was with me this morning. Todd, I saw an interview you had on Fox and Friends First this morning where you actually had the story of one woman who was making the decisions of who comes into America. These criminal cartels are taking home between $200 and $300 million a week just on human smuggling. Jump in here, Todd.
Yeah, there's no better PR representative or facilitator for these cartels than President Joe Biden, and that's frightening. Senator, I hate to view everything through the prism of politics, but we are just weeks away from the midterms. Shouldn't your party, Republicans, hold Democrats to account and hold them to a vote, putting their money where their mouth is, basically saying, look, if you don't vote for these individuals to be deemed a terror organization, then you're on their side, again, to make this point to the American people that these Democrats are the ones that are facilitating the fentanyl coming into the country.
Yeah, so absolutely, and that's exactly what we're going to try to do. Somehow, some way, we're going to try to get this to the floor in the next couple of weeks and hold them accountable. And then what we need to do is tether every Democrat candidate out there to Joe Biden. Why have all these so-called moderate Democrats, why have they voted against protecting the American kids? I don't know. But that's truly one of the major issues in this race coming up. Let's hold them accountable.
Well, what are we going to do this week, Senator? I mean, you have a continuing resolution that is expected to keep the government going. But doesn't this happen every time you guys wait until the last minute to fund the government so that Chuck Schumer could put lots of stuff in the bill, knowing that the Republicans will never sign it? And then he has to make the case, oh, well, since we can't agree on this, we're not going to have anything. We're just going to have a clean bill. And what about Joe Manchin wanting this permitting? Did he get what he promised that he was going to get, or are the Democrats reneging on that? Give us a state of affairs on this government shutdown potential this week.
Well, Maria, as expected, I think the Democrats have double-crossed Joe Manchin. I think the only thing good in this bill, as far as permitting goes, is good for West Virginia. It leaves the rest of American oil and gas industry in the lurks as well. Look, the president uses a COVID emergency to justify his inflationary spending. He wants more COVID dollars, more money for Ukraine. I bet they'll want an additional $50 billion, and that's why this is going to get voted down in the Senate, that there's not going to be 60 votes to get get it to cloture. We'll send it over to the House, and this is why it's so important who controls the majority in the House, because this will pass over on the House side. We'll get it back. We'll wait till the last second, but as far as I'm concerned, we can shut down the government. I don't think the folks back in Kansas will miss them.
And that's what Kevin McCarthy said as well. He's not signing on to anything in the House unless there's money for the southern border. So this is going to be a nail-biter. We'll see where this goes. But you mentioned the COVID emergency, Senator. You filed a motion which will force the Senate to vote on ending the COVID-19 national emergency declaration. Do you expect any Democrats to join you? It was just a week ago when President Biden said this. Watch.
Is the pandemic over?
The pandemic is over. We still have a problem with COVID. We're still doing a lot of work on it. But the pandemic is over. If you notice, no one's wearing masks. Everybody seems to be in pretty good shape. And so I think it's changing.
So, Senator, can you explain that? The pandemic is over, yet he still wants emergency money for COVID?
Well, Maria, certainly the president continues to talk out of both sides of his mouth, and he just cannot connect the dots. He's like Don Quixote out there fighting windmills, and COVID is his windmills. But he uses this declaration of emergency to seize power. He thinks that he's a king. He uses it to justify his inflationary spending and then to enforce unconstitutional mandates like mask mandates, as well as to forgive student loans. So that's what he's doing. That's how he's using this. But we have a privileged resolution. It's sitting in the Finance Committee now. When we come back in October to vote on the NDAA, he has to give us a vote. And yes, like you said earlier, let's hold some of these purple Democrat candidates accountable and see what they do. I think they're going to have to vote with us again.
Senator, real quick before you go, you're a medical doctor. The Democrats are now saying they want a new candidate in 2024 because Joe Biden is too old. Is it his age or is it something else? And is it a national security issue?
You know, so all the above. Look, I think you make a great point. He's talking out of both sides of his mouth on this national emergency issue. Is COVID over? Is it not? As I travel across the world, speak to other foreign leaders, they tell me that, look, Ukraine would not have happened if it wasn't for Afghanistan. China is in the lurks of attacking Taiwan. Why? Because we have a weak commander-in-chief right now. So that's why America needs to get out and vote this November, hold this president accountable, and remember, when you vote for any Democrat candidate, you're voting for Joe Biden's radical socialist policies.
All right, Senator, good to see you this morning. Thanks very much. We'll be watching all of that. Roger Marshall is in D.C. this morning. Quick break.